The next day, they go to dinner. Diddy says, "Do you want to do a freak off?" And Cassie says, "Yes." So the prosecutor said, "Well, why did you want to do a freak off?" And she said, "Because I was afraid he'd threaten me again." Well, if we have to pick a winner this week, clearly the prosecution won. Uh, Cassie Ventura was prosecution's star witness, and it is not unexpected that she would really tell a compelling story, and in some ways really damage Diddy, which she did on the stand. It was not everything I expected. I thought prosecutors were going to close more of a loop. At the end of this, I want to give you what I believe is the closing of the closing arguments for both the prosecution and the defense. The things I believe, based on what I heard this week, each side would say to the jury before they walk away and let the jury go into the jury deliberation room. So we will do that at the end of this. But let me just go through a couple of things. I think the defense made a huge blunder when they talked about Diddy's possible bipolar disorder and talked about him blacking out when he attacked Cassie in the hallway at the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016. I think that was a massive, massive mistake on the defense's part when they cross-examined Cassie. And I say that because 3 or 4 months ago, I interviewed Mark Agnifilo, the lead lawyer in the case. And Mark said what they were going to do was they were going to be harder on Diddy than the prosecution, and saying that the video showed despicable conduct, unforgivable conduct. They were going to go in so hard on Diddy that it would sound like the prosecution was almost weak describing what everybody sees on that screen. That's not what they did here. These are excuses saying that, well, he did it because he was bipolar. He did it because he blacked out. That is a huge, huge mistake. And I think that the defense is going to pay for that, because making an excuse for that video is terrible. Along those lines, I think they also made a big mistake when they showed a text of that Cassie had sent the day after the beating. The text was sent from Cassie to Diddy, and it said, "You treated me like a rag doll. What you did to me was awful." Essentially, that's what it said. Well, it sounds like that would hurt Diddy, and it should, and it did. But then they go on to show a couple of days later, she's writing LOL, and that they end up talking about another freak off. This is Stockholm Syndrome. What they are doing is ignoring something that's been around since the 90s, that people who are victims of domestic violence often stay with their abusers because they think it's their fault, they don't know how to get out. And just because Cassie reset and started talking about wanting freak-offs again, I mean, jurors understand this now. This is not a high concept. And to say, well, she was willing to do another freak-off, so how bad could the beating have been? Well, they saw how bad the beating is, and yet she went back. I don't know why the defense did that. It just made absolutely no sense to me. So 2 major blunders. Now, something the prosecution did today, which I was baffled by the other day, is they closed a loop on a really important thing. That, remember that when Cassie was in Cannes with Diddy on a boat, he accused her of stealing drugs and then threatened to release some of the freak-off videos with Cassie in it. Then they got in an airplane the next day, and they're flying back to New York, and Cassie is sitting there alone. Diddy walks up to her seat, sits down next to her, and shows her the videos and threatens to release them. The next day, they go to dinner. Diddy says, "Do you want to do a freak-off?" And Cassie says, "Yes." So the prosecutor said, "Well, why did you want to do a freak-off?" And she said, "Because I was afraid he'd threaten me again." But she never said that when he showed the video, he was saying, "Do a freak-off or else." It seemed like she was talking about, if you ever steal drugs from me again, I'll release the video. The prosecutor never closed the loop. And we talked about this, others talked about it. Well, guess what? Today, on redirect, prosecutors closed the loop. And they went back and they asked her about the whole plane flight. And this time she said, well, he said, I would release the video unless you do a freak off. So she was very clear this time around. If the jury believes her, that's it on the charge of coercion. That's classic coercion. Basically, I'm blackmailing her. I'm blackmailing you. And I'm saying, do a freak off or I'm going to release this tape and destroy your career. That's blackmail. That's coercion. That's having sex where you force somebody to do it. And that meets the elements of the crime. So that to me is a big win for the defense, for the prosecution. One of the things that I'm baffled by and still don't understand is it came out in testimony that Cassie settled with the Intercontinental Hotel for $10 million, saying the hotel paid her $10 million related to this incident inside the hallway in 2016. I don't understand that. And I don't understand what the liability was in the part of the hotel. The security guard came up after the beating, so there was nothing the security guard could do. It's not really about calling the police because there was no duty to call the police, although they should have, but she could have called the police too, and she didn't. So I don't understand what the duty is there that they didn't follow that would require them to pay $10 million. That part did not make sense to me. Okay, closing arguments. And this is what I think is interesting. By the way, we have 7-8 weeks to go in this trial, so anything could change. But two things really struck me. One side for the prosecution and one side for the defense. And on the prosecution side, what I was thinking was that if I were giving a closing argument, I would probably end it this way. Because remember, the thing that is seared in everybody's mind is that video at the Intercontinental Hotel. With all the evidence, with all the freak-offs, with the urination and the baby oil and, blowing up cars and all of that, the visual that everybody walks away with is that video. So I would, if I were prosecutors, end with something like this, and I'm kind of making it up as I go along, but this is the thought, that you would say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have seen what Sean Combs does when he does not get his way. He brutally beat Cassie in the hallway. And whatever it was about, whether it was about a freak-off or a cell phone or anything, when Sean Combs didn't get his way, look what he did. And he even did that in public. He was so bold, he did that in public. Well, if he is that bold in public, what do you think he did in private? When nobody was looking, when there were no cameras rolling, when Cassie either said no to what he wanted or in some way expressed no physically. What do you think he did? Do you think he said, okay, Cassie, that's fine? Or do you think he duplicated what you saw with your own eyes in a public hallway at a hotel where he was almost naked and she wanted to get away and he beat her to a pulp? What do you think he did to her in private? And if you think he did something similar to her in private so that she would do a freak off, then we have proved our case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what I would say if I were the prosecutors at the end. So the defense, so what do you say to that? And I was thinking about it, and again, I haven't really prepared this, but here is the thought. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the government could not get Sean Combs on tax problems or business problems. Sean Combs is a titan of industry, a flawed man for sure, and a violent man. But what did the government do to get him in this case? They went inside his bedroom and they didn't like the way he was having sex. And maybe what you see here is abhorrent. And it is in many respects. But there were willing participants in that room for much of the time. And do you want the government to intrude into your bedroom and judge you the way he's been judged? Did he do things wrong? Yes. Does he regret what he's done in many ways? Of course. Do you want to send somebody to prison for what they are doing behind closed doors? Do you want that? And if you do, you think about what that may mean down the road. So I don't know. I mean, which argument there is going to prevail? I think a lot is going to depend on what happens during the next 7 weeks, but we're going to be here Monday through Friday giving you the lowdown on what happened in court.